So Erik, please come to the stage.
I got two swooshes on me actually right now. I'll let you guess where they are. Hey everyone, I'm Erik. I'm a UX writer at Google, and I'm here to talk to you today about 5 practical ways that you can turn, the text in your product into language that connects better with your users. It's going to build a little bit on what you heard from Luke and from Elena just now. But before I get started, I have a question. Who here recognizes this screen? Yeah, that's more people than I thought. So this is what DOS looked like on a PC. And I might be dating myself, but the first computer that I used had no touchscreen, no mouse, no keyboard. Well, it had a keyboard. It had no microphone. There was a time when the UI was all text. Thankfully, today, software has evolved into UI that you can click, that you can tap, and that you can talk to. But this also means that when we start thinking about design, we probably start picturing how a product looks. Details like color, illustration, but not the content, right? The words on these screens are non-existent. And this scene you might recognize from a product design sprint. This isn't RISD, there's actually furniture, people are sitting, but look at the walls, they're covered with images, right? Everybody's looking at icons. Why aren't they thinking about the writing? So let's go back to this. I'm showing this because what's really going on here is a dialogue, a series of prompts and commands. It's a conversation, although a pretty horrible one. With today's focus on pixels, look and feel, and style, I think that we've actually lost sight of the conversation that we want to have with the user, right? The power of design is that we are shaping the entire user experience. And ultimately, it's about designing that conversation right down to the words you'll use. So as much as we sweat the design details, we'll need to sweat the copy details because they too are what makes the experience of your product. And that is the experience that will stick with you. So this is one of my favorite quotes, which I like to think is about UX writing. I don't think Maya Angelou knew that when she said this, but you know, she was thinking ahead. It says, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel." And so why I think this is about UX writing is because we as UX writers focus not only on nailing clear and concise writing that gets the job done, but also to pull on the levers that affect how people feel, their emotions. And that means giving more attention to voice and tone, to narrative, to users' needs, and making sure that the language you use 100% of the time consistently works towards those needs. So let's take a look at some of the ways that we do this. The first is microcopy. Now, as a UX writer, I often get asked what it is I exactly do. And I usually start by saying something like, I write all the microcopy. So you know when you get a new phone, maybe a new Google Pixel 4, and you're setting it up for the first time, there's a button on the very first screen that says, Start. I'm that guy that picked that word, that one word, start. And the response is usually something like, hang on, are you serious? Like, you got paid, someone's actually paying you real money for that? Well, the truth isn't too far off, but for now, let's just say that microcopy is one of a number of things that UX writers focus on. And microcopy is about tapping into the power of individual words. It's about distilling your message into the clearest language possible. It's about less is more, especially on mobile, because all the research, study after study after study tells us that people don't read on mobile, they scan. And so removing words actually makes it more likely that people will see what you've written. And then once just those essential words remain, it's your job to make each one of those work for you. Here's an example. This is a message that might pop up if you're in the middle of trying to cancel one of your subscriptions. It's pretty straightforward, right? So, which button actually cancels the subscription? Who thinks it's cancel? A few people think it's cancel. Who thinks it's okay? Who's not really sure? Yeah, so the point here is that it's just not clear, right? It could be cancel, it could be okay, but if your user has to think about it, you've added friction. You've given them a puzzle to solve. And all because of one word on one button. And that's what Microcopy is about. It's about taking the time. It's about agonizing over that one word so that your users don't. Okay, here's a real life example. This is from Google Maps. They were working on rideshare integration, so being able to get an Uber or a Lyft right when you're searching for directions in Google Maps. Originally, the team went with request for the button on the bottom right, naturally because you're using this to request an Uber. Well, it turns out that request didn't perform so well. The team changed the text on that button to next and ended up seeing a 33% increase in clicks, which in turn drove a double-digit increase in revenue. And keep in mind, right, millions of people use Google Maps every day. So this is Microcopy having a huge impact on the bottom line. So you might be asking, why did Next work better? To answer that, we have to zoom out, and we have to look at the rest of the story. Microcopy is about the words that we use, but the bigger opportunity happens whenever we take a step back and look at the whole flow or the user journey. It's never just about one word or one button in isolation. This is about a story. There's a storyline here. So looking back at our Google Maps example, through research, it turns out that we learned request is a commitment before the user is ready to make one. In other words, people at this stage in the flow were just kind of checking things out, just wanted to poke around and see how this ride booking thing worked within Google Maps. And they were hesitant to hit a button that instantly sent a car to them. That insight led the team to add a second step, where users could adjust their pickup location or review their payment option before requesting a ride. And this is another example from hotel search on Google. So originally the header was book a room. And again, it turned out that book a room was overly committal at this stage in the user's journey. The UX writer suggested changing that to check availability, which matches what the user's intent is at this stage, which is to browse, right, rather than to book. That simple change led to a 17% increase in engagement. So that's 17% more users who are taking the first step in booking as a direct result of tailoring language to match users' goals, not the product's goals. So those last couple examples I showed, they're about the difference that individual words can make simply by swapping one word out for another, but you don't have to be confined to just editing words where they stand. Here's an example from Google Fi. For those who don't know, Google Fi is a wireless network. It's like Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, or T-Mobile. And the context is that we were working on pricing plans for a new phone that we were selling. So zooming in, I, as the UX writer, was asked just to add a line of text under the payment option that said that the price of the phone would increase to $349 if you didn't activate it within 30 days. So I thought about what we were really trying to say here and how the hierarchy on the screen works. What I wrote, it was getting lost in this wall of text, literally getting buried. Remember, this is at the very bottom of the screen when you scroll down all the way. Don't you think it's pretty important for the customer to know that the price that they pay would almost double if they didn't activate the phone? So I thought a little bit more about where this information really belongs, and that was at the top of the screen, right where the price already is. I basically designed a new proposal that made the $199 price conditional, now says with activation. And then right below, by design, it says $349 and the conditions with that potential price. It's clear, it's upfront, and most importantly, in the right place. The takeaway is that writers are designers, and we work outside the box given to us. In this example, it meant adjusting the layout on the screen, but if you just edit words here and there, your job isn't really done. Your users are going to trust you more if they receive information and they feel like they're receiving the information in the right place at the right time. So this is a good segue into my next topic, which is about the impression that you're making with your words. The last example I showed you was really driven by a goal to build Google Fi as a new brand in the cellular industry, one that was taking a fresh approach to paying for wireless. So it turns out that language plays a big part in delivering on that brand identity. And paying attention not only to what it is you're saying, but actually how you're saying it really helps build that connection with your users. And there's even research that backs this up. So a couple years ago, I was really excited. The Nielsen-Norman Group came out with a study, and they showed that just using a more conversational tone of voice had an impact on people's likelihood to recommend your brand, right? So on metrics like Net Promoter Score, which even if you don't agree NPS is maybe the right measure, you know how notoriously hard it can be to move. And using a conversational tone of voice was actually shown to move the needle on something like that. Now, compared to choosing the right words, tone is actually is more of a challenge to figure out. It's all about nuance. It is going to depend largely on your brand's voice. It's going to depend on the context for which you're writing. So let's just walk through a quick example, just so you get the general idea of how to massage the tone. Here's an error message that says, error, unable to authenticate credentials. All right, so I have no idea what this means. It actually reminds me of the dialogue that we saw earlier on the DOS screen, right? A UX writer would kind of take a first stab at this and for clarity, kind of change it and put it in terms of what actually happened. You entered an incorrect password, so automatically that makes it clear. The next pass, we would get rid of the title because you don't need it. It kind of repeated the information that's already in the message itself. It's right to the point, wrong password. This removes words, and again, it makes it more scannable, so you're less likely to ignore what it says. Let's keep going. This is the good stuff. So for those who can't see, it's the pass for conversational tone. That password doesn't look right. Try again. Right? This is nice and human. It's something that you can imagine one person saying to another person. All of these messages are saying the exact same thing. It's the content, the what, it's all the same, but striking that conversational tone is what will help take your language to the next level. So number 5, finally I'd like to end on starting with why. So as UX writers, we often find ourselves writing sentences that begin with the word to. And we're trying to get users to do something, their calls to action, their moments of consent. It's a convention that's really powerful because it actually forces us to convey the value prop or what the benefit is up front. In this example, though, I'd argue that we're kind of failing to do that. It says, to continue, give Messenger access to SMS and contacts. Well, to continue isn't really a true user benefit, right? We're kind of gating the user here. That's not really, I mean, they do want to continue, but they probably came with something else in mind, right? If you're writing this sentence, it's your job to understand what the benefit is or what the user's goal is, and to convey that in language that they will understand, that they'll get. All right, so here's another example. This is a real-life example, again from Google Maps. It's a screen where we're asking the user to opt in to saving their location. And right off the bat, you can spot the vagueness of that headline. Get the most from Google Maps. What does that really mean? It sounds good, but what's the actual value, or what's the benefit? And then in the main text below, the sentence actually starts with, Google needs to periodically store your location to improve route recognition, that blah, 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 right? Google needs to. Google needs to. Who cares what Google needs? Yeah, I'm serious. If you're the user and you're reading this, you only care about what you need. And I see this a lot, product-centric language. So let's see the before and after on this one. Here in the new version, the headline is still vague, but it's more or less overshadowed by this new content here. It calls out specific benefits to the user. And these benefits are also phrased from the user's point of view. See suggestions for places to explore versus the product's point of view. Google needs to. The UX writer who worked on this language had to lead her team through some pretty difficult but worthwhile conversations, really zeroing in on the question of why? Why would a user want to say yes? In the end, millions more users were saying yes thanks to the revamp on the right, to the tune of a 32% increase in opt-ins. So a couple takeaways to leave you all with. Today, so much goes into a well-designed product on mobile. We pay attention to button placement, tap targets, smooth transitions, color palettes, illustration. But why stop there? User experience asks that you impact design at all levels. And in order to do that, you have to think about your language. That means diving deep on microcopy. That could mean pushing to change the narrative. It can mean writing outside the box. Making sure your voice and tone fit your brand and the context that you're writing for. It also means asking why. Having an honest conversation with your team so that you can have the same with your users. Well, I hope the topics that I covered today give you some practical ideas for maybe revisiting or rethinking the language and the text that you're using in your products. And thank you very much.